The AFL has moved to immediately suspend the 2020 Toyota AFL Premiership season, the conclusion of this weekend's matches. To say that this is the most serious threat to our game in 100 years is an understatement. It is unprecedented in its impact.
Hello everyone, you're watching Access All Areas. My name is Nat Edwards and joining me, Damien Barrett and Matthew Lloyd. And you heard from the AFL boss there, Gillon McLachlan, yesterday. As we enter uncharted waters here, the AFL and the rest of the world, as we continue to deal with this coronavirus crisis, the 2020 AFL season has been called off for now. Damo, just get your thoughts off the top as well as yours, Lloydie. I mean, initial take when you heard that news yesterday.
Yeah, look, and as it now unfolds, and we're now a day after that announcement, and you don't want to be unnecessarily dramatic about anything that is to lie ahead, but we need to be real right now. And being real about this right now means that the knowledge and the factual outcome means that this game will never, ever be the same again. This industry will never be the same again. It will recover, but not to what it had become. And the reality of that is going to kick in the next 48 hours as the cutbacks that have now been mooted actually take effect. And no one knows where this goes from here.
I want to delve into that further, but Lloydie, your take yesterday.
We treat this game of AFL like it's everything, but in the scheme of things it's not.
No.
And when you turn on the news every day, and in Italy, every day, another 500 have died. The next day, 700 have died. The next day, 800.
Yeah.
We do not want that happening in our country. So at the end of the scheme of things, AFL is meaningless on a morning like this morning.
No, you're very right there. I mean, Damo, you mentioned before the game will never be the same again when it does, in fact, resume, which may not even be this year, but next year and the years to come. Just take me through that scenario.
Yeah, and that's the unknown, isn't it, Nate? There's every chance there's not another game of football played this year at any level. As it stands, the AFL has structured an arrangement where 144 matches still need to be played. They will not be playing those games until at the earliest June. I can't see that happening. I don't think anyone in football sees that happening. It's going to be pushed back significantly from that point, the way everyone is reading this situation right now. The commitment to complete the season goes through until effectively December 31, but how realistic that becomes, as to Lloydie's point, when the world is recovering from what it's about to be hit with, is a question that no one can answer.
No, I mean, the timeline is May 31, that's when it's been suspended until, but obviously that will be reassessed at the end of April, as Gillon McLachlan said yesterday. The financial impact now, not just for the AFL, but for the 18 clubs. I mean, is there a chance that clubs could fold? Yeah,
there is. And we take on board what the AFL itself says and what the government, I think, will do eventually with regards to safeguarding loans and giving some form of guarantees and guarantors around arrangements. But there's 18 clubs in this competition who were regularly and in a majority in debt going into this scenario. So while I still feel there's going to be 18 clubs when we resume, and it may well be next year, there's going to be some dicey periods along the way, and nothing can be given as a guarantee right now that when we do resume, there's going to be 18 clubs.
Damo, can I ask you this total salary cap right now per team, and say, for example, what that is and what you think it could look like after this, and also a type of contract like Dustin Martin's where we think he could be around the 1.2 a season mark. What happens for the future of that?
It's just unknown, Lloydie. I mean, there may be no money coming in at all this year. And while the talk this time last week was of players not wanting to take 20% pay cuts, and I'm empathetic and sympathetic with where they're at, but taking it could be 100% pay cut the way it's unfolding. And I see a scenario where contracts as they stand just have to be ripped up and started again, because they're already not going to be able to be met by way of delivering the service and then receiving money for that service. And some of those deals are 6 and 7 years in the offing. In terms of the overall salary cap, the average wage has got up to somewhere near $400,000. I'd be staggered if we had lists close to 45, 48 people on average at that number. Again, I'll be speculating to go any further than that, but it will not be that number when it resumes.
Before we get on to the players and I guess what they do from now, round one, it went ahead. It was quite incredible. You were there for 3 games, Lloydie. What was it like being there, given there were no crowds? It was a really eerie sort of feeling at times.
They felt like practice matches, really. So I think that it was the least amount of tackles I've ever seen in games of football. So there's no pressure. It was a lot of circle work. And in a lot of games, one team came out of the blocks and performed well, others didn't. So, it was by Sunday, I was glad the season came to an end because it's hard to watch footy like that, Damo.
Yeah, and that you were really vocal last week when we spoke a few times on this particular platform about being uneasy about this sort of scenario unfolding as it did. As you watched the games roll out, did you have a reaction to your initial views, and did you almost feel justified in being so strong even on Wednesday night when the AFL committed to starting the season?
Oh, look, I certainly, as a footy fan, I enjoyed watching the footy even for a brief amount of time, even though it was slightly strange watching with empty stadiums and all the rest. But for me, it was always just, I felt uncomfortable given what was going on in Italy and the rest of the world, that we were just sort of going on as normal. But I understand why, because there's so many people employed and so many jobs that are at risk. So the AFL just wanted to go on, have some normality. So I understand it from that perspective. Do you still maintain that it was the right call going ahead?
Look, in the end, no damage was done in playing the games. I admired them, and my view early in the week last week was don't play. In fact, I was quite exactly on the same page as you. I got my head around playing. I liked the fact they had a go. It became very obvious about 3 games in that if they got through round 1, that was all it was going to be, and that became very real yesterday when the federal government made announcements publicly on the Sunday morning. And the AFL knew and had taken a point and stance that it was inevitable their competition was going to be shut down. So the moment Scott Morrison mentioned things like schools being shut down and borders being shut, travel being banned, the AFL Commission got itself together and enacted this plan. And a lot of what happens now, we don't know, but the players obviously now are breaking and dispersing from their clubs, going into round 2 in the traditional sense. Can you just put your athlete's hat on and how they're going to negotiate their time away from the club, trying to maintain a fitness for the possibility of a resumption?
When you play your last game of football, you've got 8 weeks off. And I think you put that hat on and you put the ultimate trust in your players. And every season, still in this day and age, some players come back better than others. Some can't be trusted on their own. So you're going to have that situation where, you've got to put trust. I think the next month you wouldn't want to see your players. You say, go, spend the time with your families. We don't know when this season's coming back, but understand that we expect you to be going on a run probably every second day. Some players are trying to put on weight still. I don't know what gym you go to. You might have to set up your own home gym, things like that. So you've just got to think through. But, it's about putting trust in your players. As I said, if we get this season up and running, some teams will come back fantastically well with its good, solid senior groups, and others won't come back well at all because, as I said, some players just cannot be trusted on their own. But probably doesn't mean a lot right now.
Well, some of the leaders at the club, the captain and some of the more senior guys, have to really check in with those younger guys to make sure that they're on track.
Yeah, that's right. And the other aspect of it too is, as I said, if we don't get a season, players still need to be cut off the list. And some will say, well, how can you when you've only played 1 game? But there's 70 footballers coming through who are better than what are currently on list. So again, decisions will have to be made on players who may not play again this year.
And to that point, the list sizes, it's been a conversation for many years anyway. Are they too big anyway? Well, they are now too big for what lies ahead. So to your point there and to the talk already, and the aftermath is so far-reaching, and club officials, as of the time we're talking today, are having conversations about their own staff and what happens with them. So it goes all the way down the rung to the point where, as we said, it's just never going to return anything like what we've had it for a good 10, 12, 15 years in this modern era of the dominance of the AFL.
And what about the draft? Because, Lloydie, obviously you're involved at under-18s level, coaching Haileybury. I mean, what happens to these draft hopefuls who had planned such a big 2020 trying to realise their AFL dream? I mean, what's going to happen there?
My understanding is that later in the year they're hoping to play Vic Metro v Vic Country in some form, and that there may be 5 weeks of exhibition games. So not actually have a season, but just the best players get out there. But I feel for those guys like a Clayton Oliver who are late bloomers, who can somehow... He wouldn't get drafted in this situation. So anyway, that's the situation we're in. But they'll be going off bottom age form as a 17-year-old. A lot of videos will be getting watched because we can't actually see them in live.
The whole financial modelling, inclusive of the draft and the system, was perfect until something like this struck. And what we've learnt, though, is that the games have to be played for the industry to actually function. And obviously when they renegotiate deals and arrangements and somehow get the competition kick-started again, that has to be looked at, I feel, for a going ahead perspective, because everything comes down when the games are not playing. They were going to come down anyway, but the gravity of that has got it to a point where there may not be any cent coming into the system at all.
And we have a situation as well where the AFLW season has been completely called off and there will be no Premier crowned for this year. I mean, the players really pushed for a 3-week final series with 8 teams competing in that final series. Should they have just played the grand final between the top 2 teams in the conference?
Hindsight, yes, but hindsight is moving at 5-minute pace these days, isn't it? And I get why they tried to have some form of integrity around a competition that was already going to be cut by 2 rounds to get to that point. So I still felt, though, last week when they committed to having a 3-week requirement to get a premier out of that final system, it was always going to be too long.
What about, why couldn't the AFLW still come together or leave it open for 4 months' time that these last 4 teams could play?
Yeah, I think it's because their season is meant to end. The payment structures are very different now, aren't they? And that's a discussion in itself.
That's the thing. Their contracts end in April. A lot of these women have part-time, full-time jobs. So isolating them from the rest of the community is something that's even more difficult.
And the AFL Commission, Lotto, one thing I've learned about what they do, when they make a decision, they don't revisit, and they canvassed all those options yesterday, decided not to award a premier and to then shut the season.
For us to get a premier this year at AFL level, does there have to be a 17-round season? Could it possibly be a 14-game season?
The scope there is to revisit that. They got in early with that, compared with what other leagues are doing around the world. Reducing it to 17, it gave them basically 10 weeks of wiggle room within the confines of a normal AFL season to get the games out. But there's nothing stopping them coming in June or July and say, right, we're going to play 8 games. You know, there's nothing stopping them. Whether they do that, Lordo, whether they just say it's just too hard, let's stop it. But the scope is there.
And because of the T20 World Cup as well, we may see a grand final not at the MCG.
Yeah, and that's if we're fortunate enough to get sport kick-started within the confines of this year.
Gut feel from both of you, does the season resume at some point this year, or do you just think we're done?
I'll say yes, we do resume at some stage.
Gut feel right now is no, as sad as that is.
You know?
Yeah, I'm probably leaning towards no, but I really hope that we can get some footy back at some point. I think everyone sort of needs it, not just the AFL industry, but fans and the wider community needs something, I guess, to hold their hat on.
And on that point, that they will and have committed already, both last week publicly and again privately overnight, to do everything they can to do that. So that's their commitment to the industry.
Well, we did have some footy on the weekend as we saw that vision of empty stadiums. I want to get one thing from each of you. What did you love about round 1?
What I love is still debutants who will never forget their first games and their families as well. And this one was Tyler Brown playing his first game, handballing to his brother, Callum Brown, to kick a goal.
So good.
They'll never forget that moment. And just to see the reaction from the mother, father, Gavin Brown, he doesn't say too much in the corner there. That was fantastic. Look how the joy that they've got. And same for Benny Cavara. He's missed 5 or 6 drafts. He's been at Williamstown for a long time and got a game, and the joy for his family.
Yeah, that was brilliant.
It was a great night.
Love that.
Just on Tyler Brown, he looked at home, didn't he?
Oh yeah,
for a first gamer.
Yeah, and there's another Dacos coming through too, so a lot to like at
Collingwood fans are loving it. What did you like, Damo?
I'm not a dancer, but I know you are. I think you are too, Lotto. So I actually enjoyed watching from the couch these types of scenes post-match. It evolved from Thursday to Friday to the Saturday, and by the time the round had been finished, there was genuine, I thought, joy in these types of scenes post-match from players. The no touching anything plays. Jeremy Finlay sitting there getting the jig up, and Haynes, and I just loved it.
That was brilliant. One of my favourite moments, I think, for me, I'd been waiting 5 months after the birth of my daughter Evie to dress her up in Hawthorn gear, which I think a lot of people actually think may be child abuse, but there's little Evie there with all her Hawthorn gear on for her very
Evie
first game.
And that's your first experience of a Hawthorn occurrence with her.
And
Exactly.
she saw her first win yesterday.
First win, so couldn't ask for anything more.
Beautiful photo.
Thank you. All right, guys, thank you so much for joining us on Access All Areas. Thank you for watching. And while this is an uncertain time, one thing is for sure, we'll have plenty of coverage on afl.com.au and the AFL Live app, and we'll keep you company throughout the next couple of months. Stay with us.